Imagine discovering that the sudden, just completely irrational panic you felt this morning while checking your email wasn't actually yours.
Right.
Like, what if that specific spike of cortisol was a biological echo? A deeply encoded survival response from, say, a great-grandparent who lived through an economic collapse a century ago.
It's a wild thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because you're walking around thinking you are this completely autonomous, isolated individual. But your very biology and even your consciousness might actually be operating as a receiver for this massive, unseen ancestral network.
Exactly.
So today, we are taking you into a paradigm that just completely shatters the neat, ink-drawn lines of a traditional family tree. We are doing a deep dive into lessons to learn, the Symphony of Consciousness, Ancestors, and What Survives by Dr. Michael G. Bomar.
Such a fascinating read.
Oh, absolutely mind-blowing. And the cover of this book alone, which you can actually see at bomarbooks.com, it really sets the stage perfectly. It has this stunning cosmic tree of life, and its roots and branches are sort of pulsing with starlight.
Yeah, it visually captures the absolute tangled beauty of human identity. It's a stunning visual, and honestly, it's necessary because the concepts Dr. Bomar outlines demand that we completely abandon the localized, highly individualistic way we usually think about who we are.
Right.
The book really challenges us to examine the very architecture of our identity, breaking it down into these specific active inheritances.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because our mission for this deep dive is to explore how 4 distinct inheritances, so that's biological, psychological, cultural, and conscious, are actively shaping your daily reality. But we're also looking at this through a wildly fascinating lens, which is speculative future science.
Right, the year 3050.
Yes. The book fast-forwards to the year 3050, specifically to the discoveries of the Transquantum Institute of Cognition and Reality Modeling, to show how future physics reframes ancient human beliefs, basically proving that consciousness is actually a non-local informational field.
And, to really appreciate the magnitude of that 3050 discovery, we first need to understand the corner humanity kind of painted itself into.
Like historically.
Exactly. For basically 100,000 years, dating all the way back to the earliest deer antler burials at Kafsa Cave, our species has been relentlessly obsessing over what happens when the physical body dies.
Right. The ultimate question.
Yeah. And we all know the classic frameworks for this. You have the ancestral continuum, like the Egyptian concepts of the Ka and Ba, or the Norse Hamingja.
Where the dead remain like an active overlapping presence with the living.
Precisely. And then you have the cycle of return, so karma and reincarnation. And finally, you have the modern materialist view, where consciousness is just the byproduct of complex meat, and death is absolute cessation.
The classic blow out the candle analogy.
Yep.
Which, we all know hits a massive wall because of the hard problem of consciousness. Because materialism can map every single neuron firing in a brain scan, but it utterly fails to explain the subjective internal experience of, actually feeling sadness or seeing the color red.
Right, it maps the wiring, but it can't find the ghost in the machine. Which brings us to the turning point in the year 2700. And this culminates in the breakthroughs of 3050. The transquantum researchers, they didn't invent some new spiritual dogma. They realized that for millennia, we had simply been asking the wrong question.
Okay, how so?
Well, humanity was obsessed with asking, does consciousness survive? But the researchers shifted the entire scientific apparatus to ask a fundamentally different question. They started asking, what survives?
Wow. Okay, I want to make sure I understand the mechanics of that shift, because it feels a little counterintuitive at first.
Sure.
In the past, people might have used an analogy like hardware and software, right? Like when the physical computer breaks, does the software go to some magical cloud?
Right, the classic tech metaphor.
Yeah. But if we apply this 3050 framework, it feels less like hardware and software and more like we've been looking at the brain as a light bulb generating its own light. And when the filament burns out, the light is just gone.
Yeah.
But these future scientists are suggesting the brain is actually more like a decryption key, trying to access a distributed blockchain ledger. And that ledger, which is the field of consciousness, is permanent and exists everywhere. Your brain just holds the temporary key to read and write your specific local data onto it.
That decryption key analogy captures the mechanics perfectly. And what's fascinating here is that the future researchers realized the ancient traditions weren't primitive superstitions. They were simply translating a profound quantum reality into the available metaphors of their time.
So they were basically right, just using different vocabulary.
Exactly. The ancestors aren't literally sitting on clouds, and a singular soul doesn't migrate from body to body like a commuter changing trains. Reality, at its absolute foundation, is informational. Consciousness isn't a substance that can be destroyed. It's a fundamental feature of the universe that operates through resonating patterns.
So if the new scientific baseline is to ask what survives within that informational field, we really have to aggressively deconstruct the you that is listening to this deep dive right now.
We do.
Because if someone asks me who I am, my default is to just give my name, my occupation, and, a highlight reel of my most important memories. But Dr. Bomar's research breaks human identity down into a highly specific layered architecture.
A four-part architecture, to be exact, and understanding how these layers interact is critical because they are all fundamentally informational, yet they behave very differently over time.
Okay, let's go through them.
So the foundational layer, the one we are probably most familiar with, is the biological inheritance. Now, since you and the listeners likely already understand the basics of epigenetics, we don't really need to rehash how trauma alters gene expression.
Right.
The crucial takeaway from the 30/50 perspective is how those epigenetic markers actually function as informational locks.
So it's not just about a descendant inheriting a higher risk for a metabolic disorder because their ancestors survived a famine.
No, it's much deeper than that.
It's about the physical body literally serving as a biological hard drive, like archiving the environmental and emotional data of previous generations.
That is exactly the point. The trauma or the adaptation isn't stored as a conscious memory. I mean, you don't actively remember the famine.
Right, of course.
But it is a distinct biological pattern encoded in the flesh. Your cellular structure is vibrating with the survival data of people you have never even met.
Which naturally begs the question, if the biological layer sets these physical epigenetic locks, how does that translate into the way we actually think and feel on a daily basis? Does the biology inherently create a psychological inheritance?
It creates the parameters for it, yes. The psychological inheritance is the second layer. Think of this as the behavioral groove created by those biological locks, combined with the modeled behavior of your family.
Oh, okay.
It dictates your attachment patterns, implicit beliefs, and family narratives. So if your biological inheritance gave you a hyperactive cortisol response due to ancestral stress, your psychological inheritance is the anxious narrative you construct to make sense of that physical feeling.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the pattern of responding to the world with suspicion or fear is passed down implicitly.
It really is perfect logical sense. The biology hands you a physiological state, and the psychology basically hands you the narrative to justify.
Exactly.
But here's where I kind of struggle with the next layer in Dr. Bomar's architecture. The third inheritance is cultural. And, I mean, I can accept biological markers in my cells and behavioral grooves in my psychology. But culture,
It's a leap for a lot of people.
yeah, because we treat culture as an external environment. It's the stuff we learn in school or, the media we consume. How can we call that a hard inheritance in the same breath as our actual DNA?
Well, it feels external because you are entirely submerged in it, but culture is arguably the most powerful constraint on your localized identity. The researchers of 30/50 define culture as a distributed ancestral intelligence.
Distributed intelligence.
Okay. Consider the mechanics of language. The syntax, the vocabulary, the very structure of the language you speak fundamentally alters the neuroplasticity of your developing brain. It dictates what concepts you can even formulate.
Wait, so the language itself acts as a cognitive boundary?
A profound one. Culture is the literal voice of the dead, structuring your thoughts before you even realize you were thinking them.
Wow.
Yeah, when a specific culture is lost, those unique ancestral voices and the specific cognitive frameworks they built, they are silenced forever. It's an invisible architecture of meaning you are born into, heavily restricting which informational patterns from the universal field your brain can successfully decode.
The voices of the dead dictate the parameters of our conceptual reality.
Yeah.
That's heavy.
Very.
It really is the water we swim in. Which brings us to the fourth and final layer. If biology, psychology, and culture are the filters, what is at the core?
The conscious inheritance. This is the most subtle, yet really is the foundation of everything. It is entirely distinct from the content of your mind.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
Meaning it is not your specific memories, your political beliefs, or your personal preferences. It is the raw capacity for awareness itself. And this is the layer that the transquantum researchers of 30/50 empirically proved is non-local and universal.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if we inherit all these specific layers, the cellular trauma, the anxious narratives, the cultural syntax, and at the core is this universal awareness.
Hmm.
Do we inherit our ancestors' specific memories? Like, do I have my great-grandmother's memories locked away in some dusty corner of my cerebral cortex?
No, you do not.
Okay.
And understanding why introduces one of the most vital concepts in Dr. Bomar's work, which is the Great Separation. The future researchers proved a definitive mechanical difference between the data and the awareness.
Right.
Memory is content. Consciousness is the container.
So to go back to our earlier analogy, memory is the specific data written on the ledger, but consciousness is the actual ledger itself.
That's the mechanism, yeah. The book illustrates this beautifully by examining medical anomalies, like severe retrograde amnesia.
Oh, that's a great example.
It really is. Look at what happens when a patient's neural pathways are so damaged that they lose all explicit memory. They forget their name, their spouse, their entire personal history. The localized data is entirely wiped from the biological hard drive.
Right, the data's gone.
Exactly. But, and this is the crux of the 30-50 paradigm shift, they remain completely conscious. They are vividly aware of the present moment. If memory and consciousness were generated by the exact same localized biological process, losing the data would mean losing the awareness. But the awareness persists.
That's incredible. You know, there's a theatrical metaphor in the book that I think really anchors this concept, though I actually want to adapt it slightly to fit what we're talking about right now.
Go for it.
Think of your life as a highly complex rendered simulation. Memory is the specific simulation being run. It has your character, your plot twists, your drama, your trauma.
But consciousness is the electricity powering the monitor. So when the character dies, or the simulation crashes, the plot stops. The memory ends. But the electricity remains completely unaffected by the drama of the simulation.
The implications of that separation are staggering, especially when we look at modern psychological suffering. If we connect this to the bigger picture of our daily lives, our entire modern fear of death and failure is based on a fundamental misidentification.
We identify as the simulation. We think we are the character.
We cling to the character. We think, I am the sum total of my memories, my achievements, the specific narrative. So when we face the concept of death, or even just significant life changes, we experience this existential terror because we know the character's storyline is going to end.
Yeah.
The irony is that the strict materialists were actually half right. The localized personal self, that specific configuration of memories and cultural identity, that does cease. The simulation shuts down.
But we aren't the simulation. We are the witness self, right? The underlying electricity experiencing the rendering.
Exactly. But let me push back on this for a second, because if memory doesn't survive and only the container of consciousness does, where exactly is this container located?
That's the big question.
Yeah, if the materialists are wrong and the physical brain isn't generating this electricity, how does the 30-50 research explain the mechanics of a biological brain interacting with a non-local field?
So the mechanism the Transquantum Institute identified is based on complex geometric resonance.
Yeah.
The physical brain does not generate consciousness. Instead, it acts as an incredibly intricate biological lens or an acoustic chamber. It filters and focuses a universal informational field into a localized, bounded experience.
Wait, let me make sure I understand this, because it feels like a massive leap.
Yeah.
If I suffer traumatic brain damage, my entire consciousness changes, my personality shifts, my awareness alters. Doesn't that directly prove the physical brain is manufacturing the consciousness?
No, it proves the brain is essential for formatting it into a localized experience.
Formatting it, okay.
Think of the acoustic chamber. If you drastically alter the physical shape of a violin, the music it produces will sound distorted, or it might stop producing sound altogether.
Right.
But altering the violin didn't destroy the concept of music, nor did it destroy the musician playing it. It only destroyed that specific instrument's ability to resonate with the intended frequencies. The signal is still present in the universal field. Your localized instrument is just broken.
Ah, okay, that clarifies the mechanism completely.
Yeah.
So we are individual acoustic chambers, shaped by our biological, psychological, and cultural inheritances, and we are resonating with specific frequencies from a non-local field.
You've got it.
But, I mean, this raises a huge red flag for me regarding human agency. If I'm just a node picking up ancestral resonance from a quantum field, how do I have free will?
That's the natural next question.
Right. Like, aren't we just biological meat puppets acting out our ancestors' unresolved drama? If my anxiety is just a frequency from 1929, where is the me in all of this?
This raises a very important question, and it's the exact friction point where the philosophy meets the physics. You are not a meat puppet. because you possess the conscious inheritance, that underlying awareness.
Okay.
Informational resonance operates on the principle that like attracts like. When an ancestor lived, their intense emotional and psychological states, patterns of deep trauma, or even patterns of incredible resilience were deposited as stable informational frequencies in the non-local field.
Right.
Because you share their biological and cultural architecture, your acoustic chamber naturally defaults to resonating with those specific ancestral frequencies.
So the anxiety isn't a ghost haunting me. It's just my specific neurological geometry defaulting to a frequency of fear left in the field by, say, a great-grandparent who lived through a war.
Right.
My receiver is picking up their broadcast.
Exactly. But here is where free will enters the equation. Free will is the capacity to use your conscious awareness to recognize the default resonance and actively choose to alter the geometry of your own chamber.
No.
You're not doomed to vibrate at the frequency of ancestral fear. And conversely, this also explains sudden surges of intuition. When you face a crisis and suddenly feel an inexplicable wave of courage, you might be successfully tuning your internal geometry to resonate with an ancestor's hard-won wisdom that still exists in the field.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, on a random Tuesday? I mean, it's deeply fascinating to talk about acoustic chambers and non-local informational resonance, but how does this shift in perspective actually change the way we approach a stressful workday or a conflict with our family?
It revolutionizes our approach to responsibility and healing, which Dr. Bomar details in part 6 of the book. Once you realize that you are a leaf on a vast, interconnected ancestral tree, healing can no longer be viewed as just an intellectual exercise.
Yeah.
You cannot simply think your way out of an inherited frequency.
Because the biology remembers, right? If the epigenetic lock is physical, a purely psychological narrative shift isn't enough to change the resonance.
Precisely. This is why the book emphasizes practices like somatic release. And to clarify that mechanism, somatic release isn't just about, getting a massage or stretching.
Right.
It is the process of using physical therapies and deep nervous system regulation to chemically alter those epigenetic locks.
Yeah.
You are physically releasing the cellular tension that holds your acoustic chamber in that default state of trauma. By combining that physical release with conscious, intentional forgiveness, you actively dampen the negative frequency.
You literally change the shape of your chamber, so you stop resonating with the ancestral static.
And in doing so, you strike an entirely new positive note in the informational field. This is the core application of the 30-50 paradigm. We are all living as future ancestors.
Let me make sure the scale of this is clear to the listener. If someone goes to therapy today or engages in deep somatic work to finally resolve a pattern of anger they inherited from their father, based on this science, they aren't just improving their own subjective mood. They are literally editing the non-local informational field for their great-great-grandchildren.
Emphatic confirmation, yes. The edits you make to your own localized resonance deposit new, stable frequencies into the universal ledger. Every time you utilize your conscious awareness to choose empathy over reactivity or courage over inherited fear, you are actively writing the next movement of the human symphony.
That is just incredible.
You are providing a new, higher frequency broadcast for future tuning forks to pick up.
That completely reframes human existence from something terrifyingly fragile into something incredibly empowering. It relieves the crushing pressure of the materialist view, where I feel like I have to desperately preserve this exact personality and this exact memory bank to avoid annihilation.
Exact.
Instead, we have this profound reality. The localized data of your life will eventually fade, but the specific patterns of love, resilience, and wisdom you actively carve into the field will echo infinitely.
It perfectly harmonizes the tension between the individual and the collective. Your unique individuality, your specific configuration of inheritances, it matters profoundly because it is the only mechanism capable of carving those specific new patterns into reality.
Right.
You are the vanguard of the field's evolution, but you don't have to cling to your localized identity in terror because the pure awareness that powers you is eternal. You are both the temporary leaf and the immortal tree.
Well, we have navigated an immense conceptual landscape today. To distill this deep dive down for you, the listener, you are not a solitary data point locked inside a biological machine. You are a dynamic, interconnected architecture of four inheritances.
Beautifully said.
Your biology holds the physical archives of the past, your psychology shapes the behavioral narratives you experience, your culture constructs the very linguistic boundaries of your reality, and your conscious inheritance, which is the electricity powering the whole system, is the non-local awareness experiencing it all.
You are in a state of constant geometric resonance with the ancestral past. But more importantly, through your conscious choices and physical healing today, you are actively coding the informational field of the future. The memory of your specific storyline will eventually close, but the conscious container and the resonant patterns you introduced into it will survive.
The music never dies. Well, actually, you just have to choose which frequency to tune into. So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you step back into your daily routine. Think about a time recently when you had a sudden, inexplicable gut feeling,
Mm-hmm.
a flash of pure intuition that solved a complex problem at work, or a random surge of calm when you should have been panicking. Based on the discoveries of 3050, what if that wasn't just a random misfiring of neurons? What if that was a moment of perfect informational resonance? What if, in that exact second, your brain's architecture naturally tuned into a frequency of profound wisdom left behind in the non-local field by an ancestor who survived the exact same struggle? Think about that the next time you feel completely overwhelmed and lost. You might already have the answer echoing inside your cells. It's just a matter of adjusting the geometry of your receiver.